darkness deepens, Lord, with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless soul, abide with me. Swift to its close, swift to its close, ebbs out life's little days. Earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away. Change and decay in all around I see. Oh, thou who changes not, abide with me. Oh, thou who changes not, abide with me. I need thy presence every passing hour. What but thy grace can for the tempter's power? Who like thyself, my guide and stay can be? Through cloud and sunshine, Lord, abide with me. Through cloud and sunshine, Lord, abide with me. Abide with me. Abide with me. Abide with me.
Is going to be Clay Hiles.
Well, hello everyone. Good afternoon. I'm very glad to be joined with all of you in this celebration, particularly at this moment in this longest and darkest of years. We are all surely thinking more deeply than ever before in our lives about our connections to community and the people who matter to us in a profoundly meaningful way. And so Bill mattered to all of us gathered today to think of him together, to celebrate the Bill that we shared and the Bill that each of us had a chance to know in a particular and personal way. In the 40 years that I was lucky enough to have Bill in my life as a colleague, as an intimate friend, we shared a wonderful combination of commitment to serious endeavors in the larger world, especially in our efforts to do what we could to ameliorate and eliminate the abomination of caging our fellow citizens, our brothers and sisters. And less grimly, we shared the worlds of art and music, the opera always part of our time together. We also had an endless appreciation and enjoyment for life's frolics. Bill and I, and many, many other friends, could move seamlessly from high purpose to low humor, always honoring each other with the great badge of friendship steeped in a recognition of the irony of all things in life, often expressed in that wonderful kind of banter and badinage that is his and my continuing declaration of admiration, trust, and affection. Impish impertinence was our bond. It's possible that my first earnest conversation with Bill came in the form of my complaint to him, then the chair of the Correctional Association of New York 4 decades ago, that the annual gathering of the association at the Harvard Club was a party for mutual admiration of a bunch of elite white men. To that bit of obnoxiousness on my part, he replied, "Well, that's why we invited you." And thus it continued until the summer, when I learned that a large part of my intellectual life, my heart, my soul had been taken from me. How many times in the middle of a deep natter about how to improve the world did Bill restlessly try to get me to come to the point? I would say, "May I finish?" And he would answer, "You may, but I doubt you can." For which I reminded him that he had the patience and attention span of a gnat, and that was an insult to gnats. But of course, his real patience and attention were vast. His ideas and leadership contribute to the great success of so many civic enterprises, from prison reform to the promotion of the arts and literature, including his own both insightful and insouciant writings. And we should always rejoice in the breadth of his interests, how he could go so gracefully from the Lenox Hill basketball court, famous for that three-pointer exactly 18 feet out, to the role of supernumerary in Don Carlo on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera. A Renaissance man for sure, but I think that appellation falls short of the mark. His professional accomplishments, his delightful literariness, his passion in seeking justice, especially for those behind prison walls, all of these were infused with a kind of incisive thoughtfulness, energy, refreshing irony. His interests, like his friendships, were wide, varied, and deep. Bill charged through life as he walked through cell blocks, determined both to learn and to teach, so alive with the wonderful combination of seriousness and mirth and humanity. I will always sigh with equal satisfaction at reading his many written odes to his New York City and recalling his actual urgent spoken voice when summoned by the moment. Here are 2 of my favorite memories of Bill forever. Once, while meeting with the deputy mayor for criminal justice of the city of New York, after long discussions of the way in which prisoners are fed at odd times and with bad food, Bill began to get, I could see, agitated and restless. And there came a moment when somebody on the deputy mayor's staff tried to describe once more the difficulty of providing fresh bologna sandwiches with 2 pieces of bologna. And suddenly, Bill Dean looked up and cried out, "What a mess." And then with that magnificent brow that bore the Cardinal's hat in Don Carlo, leaned forward and pounded the table, repeating over and over again, "What a fucking mess." After our encounter over the parties at the Harvard Club, Bill led the transformation of the annual event of the Correctional Association to one of the most deeply thoughtful, I think, meaningful events in the gala circuit in New York City. It celebrated, under his and our direction, the lives of individual citizens and their work who had really made a difference. No one fit the mold or the bill better than Bill. At the event at which we presented the association's 1844 award to Bill, I felt more than at almost any other occasion I've ever attended, many, many years of many occasions, the palpable love and admiration that everyone there gathered felt toward Bill. At that occasion, Bill, in accepting the award, concluded by telling the story of a trip we took once to Sing Sing to see an in-house performance, all by incarcerated people on the stage, of West Side Story. Bill described his feeling when the moment came for the song, Somewhere, Somewhere There's a Place for Us. Bill's voice began to crack, and I think all our hearts cracked then. Hearing this extraordinary man tell us the deepest feelings of his heart. Bill, there will always be a place for you in all of our hearts and all of our thoughts. All who love justice, who care for the least fortunate, have lost a great champion. We will march forward without you, but better for our time together. Thank you.
Clay, thank you so much for your beautiful words. Okay, can everyone hear me? Like a thumbs up or something? Okay. I just want to make sure. So Joan, you are going next. I'm going to, let me just see. I just hit it, asked to unmute. So, Joan, can you ready?
He's already unmuted.
Okay, okay, beautiful. Thank you, Joan.
This is Joan Davidson. Bill was my neighbor and friend, wonderful friend for more than 30 years, I think. He lived on Lexington Avenue, 2 blocks from me. And so we were neighbors on the Upper East Side. He is indeed a true son of the Upper East Side, Bill is. Although amazingly, before I introduced him, he had never set foot in the storied William Pole Deli, which had been there for generations, famous in our neighborhood, and unknown to Bill until we went together. And a few blocks away. But he was an aficionado of our neighborhood museums, the Met, the old Whitney, the Frick, and although a bit out of our turf, also the Morgan and the Guggenheim, and of course his beloved New York Society Library, where he was, of course, much involved and a brilliant leader for so many years. Bill had achieved a kind of hero status with the neighborhood kids, where he would pick up a basketball game whenever we ran across them in the neighborhood. And he was also famous for always flipping out of the back pocket that famous picture of his basketball stardom at college. And then there was down to the 77th and 68th Street subway stops. Bill would pop down there and go on board and hand out to perhaps dozing riders the journal. Can you see the journal? This is Bill's journal, which was handed on all sides to riders in the subway. And this journal was his writings on anything that interested him, on his travels, on his favorite writers, Herman Melville, mostly Chekhov, on the opera, and of course on his beloved New York City. And they were handed out hither and yon. And then they grew and grew and enlarged themselves and were turned into books. And can this be seen? This was one of his books. So Bill visited us up here in the Hudson Valley often, always bearing a great bag of pistachio nuts. They were very well received. His favorite activity up here in the Hudson Valley was to sit on my porch, gazing out at the mighty Hudson and sitting there jotting down ideas for his journal. And every now and then that would be interrupted when a passing young person entered the view, whereupon Bill would stop and have a very interesting conversation with said young person about the meaning of life and what they should do with their lives. So it happened that on the fateful day, I had been going down from the Hudson Valley to New York, to Manhattan, to take care of dentists and that sort of thing. And that very evening, I had looked forward to a dinner with Bill at his favorite sushi place. I am so, so sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Okay, so I assume you can all hear me. The next speaker is David Lenevsky. David, are you there? Elizabeth, do you see David Lenevsky on this list?
He was there, but you might have to unmute him. He was here earlier.
I'm just looking by name. Let me see if I can. No.
He was here when we first signed on.
Yeah, I'm sorry, everybody. Thank you for your patience.
Let's see.
I don't see him under the list of participants under the name.
He was there earlier.
And I'm trying to see if I can unmute everyone, mute all. I don't think anyone's muted.
Yeah, most people are muted. Oh, okay. Yeah, just go on to the next person, Stephen.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, so Nimet, are you there, Nimet?
Yes, I am here.
Oh, so
No,
good
I'm
to see
muted.
you, Nimet. So it's so great to see you. So yes, why don't you go right ahead and share whatever you like.
I first clapped eyes on Bill Dean when he was enjoying a star turn at the Metropolitan Opera in the role of a cardinal presiding over the Otto da Fe scene in Verdi's Don Carlo. He made quite an impression with his already considerable height, augmented by a cardinal's hat and the mitre he was holding. Our first meeting was at a party in Bill's honor, offered by a mutual friend in honor of Bill's Metropolitan Opera debut. By now, Bill had written an article for the New York Times on the fun of being a supernumerary in the Met Opera production. It was one of many articles that he would go on to write, so many for the Christian Science Monitor. I came to know Bill in many different roles after that, roles that were not necessarily related to his very, very laudable career. There was the Bill Dean who drove a truck on Wednesday nights from a supplier in Lower Manhattan to Grand Central Station. And there a line of homeless people waited for bologna sandwiches and chips. He did this with patience and humor, and he would comment on how much he enjoyed driving a truck in New York City. There was little that Bill didn't find joy in, and that was one of the joys of knowing Bill. He made time for so many things and so many people. On weekends, he went to prisons to visit with the prisoners, but time was always left for the Metropolitan Opera Saturday afternoon broadcast. Music, and not just opera, were terribly important to Bill. He once told me that Vera, his mother, had always said no matter how things stood financially, there was always an emphasis on music, theater, and travel. And Bill quite lived by that dictum. He was devoted to theater, to Chekhov overall, and to the American musical theater. Among my happiest memories is seeing Bill with his long legs sprawled on my living room floor, singing lustily, not very well, but certainly lustily, American musical comedy songs. We discovered a love of biking, and we bicycled, both of us, all over New York City. It became a tradition for a while that Bill and members of my family would bike around the city on New Year's Eve and stop off for a hamburger. We rode bicycles with groups, trips to Long Island, visits with friends, and one year, extrapolating on the theme of travel, well after the 1980s, when Russia had absorbed glasnost and perestroika, I came up with the idea of biking in Russia. Bill was intrigued and seemed willing to give up his annual pilgrimage to Venice, and I would give up my annual pilgrimage to France or Italy and whatever music festival attracted me. We found a small ad in an obscure biking magazine offering a bike tour of Russia's golden medieval ring, not far from Moscow. Vladimir, Zagorsk, now known as St. Sergius, Rostov, Suzdal, and Yaroslavl. And we signed on. It was September of 1993. And I was to find Bill the best of good sports, always anxious to learn and bringing a great deal of knowledge to our little adventure. There were many unknowns when we landed in Moscow's Sheremetyev airport. How big was our group going to be? How many were we? What kind of accommodation? A man named Sasha stepped forward. He was holding 3 wilted carnations for me, and he gave us all a big golden smile.
WQXR, she's the class.
We all became friends rather quickly. There was also a driver by the name of Sergei. It soon became clear that the group...
But she's a famous...
I'm still here, folks. I'm going on. It soon became clear that the group that was touring Russia that summer was Bill Dean and one Nimet Habashi. It was a remarkably small little outfit. We were staying with friends of Sasha's all over the Golden Ring area. Our first day, of course, was spent in the Kremlin in Moscow, however. We did it up proud and eventually found ourselves at the magnificent Cathedral of the Archangel. I was marveling at the frescoes and commented on a charming version of a donkey bearing Christ into Jerusalem. Sasha muttered, "It's not horse, is donkey. Backed up by Bill, or rather, is not donkey, is horse, said Sasha. Backed up by Bill, I said politely that it was supposed to be a donkey, bearing witness to Christ's humility in coming into Jerusalem, not on a palfrey, but on a humble donkey. Again, Sasha intoned, it's not horse, it's donkey. Well, this went back and forth with the erudite Bill giving Sasha a crash course on the New Testament. Sasha was a good communist who hadn't a clue what Bill was talking about. But Bill and I had a wonderful time with Sasha. Sasha might not have learned his history, but he had read War and Peace 3 times. We drank a lot of vodka that summer. We listened to a lot of stories of what it was like living in Russia. We learned a lot, and we wanted to take part. We wondered why our picnics were always quite ready for us, only to find out that Sasha and his friend were lining up for bread, chleb, at 5 o'clock in the morning while Bill and I slept. So we took to queuing up with our friend Sasha. Bill, always the good sport. And when at the end of a meal, we said, you know, we'd really love to have a bath. Could we ask for some hot water? We were simply handed the remainder of the night's sum of our contents. We rolled with it all. Bill, always the best of good sports. We took our hosts one night to the Mariinsky Theater in St. Petersburg. We took the standing room tickets and gave them the few tickets we could get that were seated. I never saw people attend music with that much reverence. And Bill and I marveled at that together and remembered it always. Bill added enormously to my life. I learned from his enormous generosity to life. A life redolent with generosity matters. A lesson learned from Bill. I cherish Bill. I cherish the memories. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you so much, Nimet. Okay, so the next speaker is Jim Marlis. And
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Jim.
Well, I'm here and happy to share some memories. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Nimet. Thank you, Clay. And Joan, these were fantastic. And I'm using Nimet's word, reverential recollections of a very, very fine man. I remember it all began in September. It was the autumnal equinox, 1955. And there were a bunch of young guys strolling through the Harvard yard back into the freshman union. And we were all going to have dinner together. And you went and got your plate, filled it with food, and you were filled with curiosity and with hope and with a little shyness. You looked around for a place to sit. And there was this guy with a great big smile, gesturing with his hand, why don't you sit here? So I sat across from Bill, and he proceeded to pump me, giving me an opportunity to tell him the entire story of my then not very long life, and seemed extremely interested. And we began a very, very engaging friendship, which has lasted for 2/3 of a century. We had another friend. Through Bill, I met Teddy Meyer, another New Yorker, as was Bill. And the three of us became roommates at college, our junior and senior years. Bill proved to be one of the more interesting characters that one had ever met. He was a complete original. He was born, as we all know, many of us, before the untimely death of his young father, and therefore brought up by someone who turned out to be one of the most formidable ladies I have ever met, his Russian emigre mother, Vera. To know Vera was the key to understanding Bill. She was strong, fiercely analytical, intellectually independent, resourceful, wise. She would not suffer very long those who were found to be deficient in any of these virtues. Least of all, an only son, who, thank God, had the mental equipment and the determination to measure up. And did he ever? Fond memories really persist and continue to touch one of this lanky guy, loose of limb, who loved basketball, played almost till his last breath. About several months ago, we were going to our, I don't remember, 60th or 65th reunion at college, and 60th, I guess. And Bill and another person, the widow of another classmate of ours, and I stopped our car. There was a little basketball game going on in the neighborhood where we were about to go and have dinner. And we stopped, and Bill went over to the kids and took the ball and began to play with them for 10 minutes, just out of the blue. Now, not only was he charming and engaging and intrigued by young people, but at our age, he was still
Elizabeth, it looks like Jim's screen is frozen. Should we, can you hear me? Yeah. Should we maybe go to the next person, then come back to Jim? Yeah, yeah, it's unfortunate, but obviously that happens sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's fine, as long as he knows we're doing that. Hopefully he can hear us.
Elizabeth, can you send him a chat?
Yes, I'll do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a shame, but hopefully he'll, technical difficulties, we'll get back to Jim. Okay, and then, and again, my apologies. So Judy Fox, I don't know if Judy or Tom are on this Zoom, because that was a maybe.
They were here.
Okay, oh gosh, are other people muted? Does anyone?
Judy and John.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
right here.
Okay, yes. Would you like to speak?
Would you like to speak?
You speak.
Well, Jim, 1955, new bill for. Can you hear us at all?
Yeah, you were breaking up a little. Yeah, Elizabeth, that's a shame. It's, do you think it's a problem on my end, or?
I don't know enough about Zoom to know that. We should probably just keep going and we'll cycle back.
And we'll find out, I guess. Yeah, I am so sorry about this. Okay, well, let's try Peter Swords. Or is,
Here I am.
okay,
I met Bill in the fall of 1959 when we matriculated at the Columbia Law School. And we remained close friends for the next 60 years. Early in the 70s, he persuaded me to join the board of the Correctional Association. And that wonderful group would meet every other month. And we were both on the board for about 40 years, so I saw a great deal of Bill and some of the other illustrious people on this Zoom. Some of our fondest memories of Bill is driving him up to Glimmerglass and back. He was always funny and great pleasure to be with. Bill was generous and a man of unswerving principle, with a special concern for the vulnerable. Bill was thoughtful and curious, and a writer perhaps before all. For me, life brightened up in Bill's presence. He was funny, and he showed that he really cared about you. I consider it a great, great blessing to have had him as a friend. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Stephen,
Yes.
so my son, Jack, your nephew, the Next Generation has recommended that if people have a weak connection and they wish to speak, they just turn their video off and we just do the audio when they're speaking. That may be why it's freezing on some of the screens.
Because we have so many participants.
Well, it's just an individual connection. So obviously Peter's just worked, but if someone speaking has a weak internet connection, they should turn off the video part. That's the recommendation. I saw some other people nodding their heads on that.
All right.
So I'm just passing that along.
And that's from Jack or Alexander? Or...
Jack.
Thank you to the young people. Thank you, Jack.
My pleasure.
Yes, and this stuff is tricky. We're all doing the best we can, and I apologize for technical challenges. So I guess if Jim Marlis, if you're back on, no. And the Foxes got cut off. If you're back on, we could try again. But if not, then we can move on to John Kiernan. Are you there?
Okay, am I audible to folks?
Very audible. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you and hi all. It really seems almost impossible to talk about our longtime collective friend Bill Dean without first talking about the people on today's Zoom conversation. That's because I'm going to venture to suggest that so many of us share an important common characteristic apart from the fact that we all love Bill. That on one or more occasions, and for some of us on many occasions, we allowed ourselves to be persuaded by Bill to alter what we considered our carefully calibrated life priorities, and instead to allocate more energies to helping someone who really needed help because Bill asked us to do so. What a legacy that is. The contribution for which Bill may most deserve to be celebrated, and possibly his greatest contribution to many of us who had the great fortune to know him, was not just his wonderful personal charm and human touch, but also his truly dazzling gift for persuading others to help the helpless. How perfect it was for Bill to spend 25 years as the executive director and virtual personification of Volunteers of Legal Services, or VOLS, where many of us got to know him best. That organization has been dedicated for the 35 years since its founding to the concept that someone with deep roots in the legal services and humanitarian needs communities, Bill, for a quarter century, could leverage his personal capacity to help to far higher levels by forging partnerships between the needy clients and the lawyers at New York City's great law firms who wanted to give back by volunteering to provide needed legal services without charge. Now, if that description of Vols's mission makes it difficult to discern where the identity of Bill leaves off and the identity of Vols picked up, that's the way a lot of us viewed things for several decades. Those of us who worked with Bill in this small but mighty enterprise all recognized his big trick, that his gentle and self-effacing personal style, his grace and tact that so many have mentioned, his good humor and his warm displays of personal affection for lawyer after lawyer after lawyer, were not only essential components of his genuine congenial nature, but also powerful weapons deployed in support of his ferocious belief that these clients needed help, these lawyers needed to serve these clients, and he was just the person to help the lawyers find and redirect the most important elements of their basic professionalism and humanity, matching the needy clients with volunteers whom he regarded as also needy in their own ways. So Bill asked all of us, and eventually hundreds and really thousands of others, for work on behalf of his charges. He sprinkled his asks with warm tales about his great loves, New York City, basketball and opera, Venice, and later India. He called us young man or young lady with evident affection. He reminded us of what we wanted to consider our best selves. And then he got us, one after another, working to support the people he knew needed help. A list of Bill's projects illustrates how he put into practice many of the core elements of his beliefs about the human need for personal generosity. He started the Wills Project for the gay men's health crisis, advising young men who were dying in droves without having done any life planning during the worst years of the AIDS epidemic. And he started the Incarcerated Mothers Project, protecting women's prisoners' efforts to stay in communication with their children and preventing the terminations of those prisoners' precious parental rights until they could be released and reunited with those children. He served other prisoners in the New York system, as we've heard, among the most despised and least attended to people he could identify, and therefore ones to whom he was naturally attracted, as longtime chair of the Correctional Association. He helped micro-entrepreneurs trying to convert ideas into enterprises that could support them and their families. Children who came to schools and hospitals but could not fully benefit from those institutions because of fundamental legal and other problems at home. Unemployed workers appealing denials of their claims for unemployment insurance, immigrants trying to remain in their homes, and so many more. Wherever Bill turned, his fundamental motivator was compassion, and his fundamental strength lay in his capacity to translate his compassion into leveraged, large-scale action by enticing us all and so many others to help. Of the very large group of lawyers and friends whom Bill enticed to give time and energy to help a needy client over the decades, I wonder how many of us ever regretted saying yes to his urgings. The answer may be nobody. Bill also had the profound ability to help people who volunteered their time and efforts feel more fully realized as lawyers and as people for having done so. His pairings were a gift to everyone. And one of the best components of those gifts was the opportunity for so many of us to become and enjoy being for so many years Bill's friend. We all owe tremendous gratitude to this gentle and fierce, gracious and uncompromising, unfailingly generous and decent man.
John, thank you so much. So I think I'm just going to keep moving down the list. And John, thank you again. Sarah, are you there? Sarah Efron?
I am.
Yay, yay, yay. Sarah has been so helpful to me. Thank you, Sarah. So take it away, Sarah.
Okay. I'm Sarah Efron, and I worked with Bill for 25 years at Volunteers of Legal Service until he retired in 2001. And I'm honored that Bill's family asked me to read this essay that was published in the New York Law Journal shortly after Bill retired. So today I'm not going to talk about my work with Bill because we wouldn't have enough time, but I'm going to read The Red Oak that was published on August 19th, 2011. Making sure no one sees me, I embrace the trunk of my Central Park tree, a red oak planted in the 1920s on the East Green, just inside the park from 70th Street and 5th Avenue. It is mine because the tree has been endowed in my name by board members of Volunteers of Legal Service on the occasion of my retirement as executive director. No better gift could have been chosen for Central Park has played a major role in my life, so much so that when asked my place of birth, I respond, Central Park, found under a mushroom. Each morning before school, my dog and I would walk along the bridle path by the reservoir. A childhood autumnal pleasure was searching for fallen horse chestnuts on the ground. Beneath prickly protective skins, I came upon beautiful, shiny, mahogany-colored nuts. These I took home to place in a row on the window still in my bedroom. They remained there until spring. Before embracing my tree, I first had to select it. To help me do so, I met with Neil Calvanese, Vice President of Operations for the Central Park Conservancy, who has worked with park trees for the past 30 years, and Hannah Parker, manager of the Conservancy's Tree Trust. We visit my two favorite places in the park, the first just south of the zoo. Years ago, there was a pony track here. Children, including my sister and me, were placed in pony-drawn carts and led around the track by an attendant. The pony track is long gone, replaced by grass and trees. Most mornings on my walk from home through the park to the 60th Street, 5th Avenue subway station, I sit on a bench here for 20 minutes to write, a tranquil, productive way to begin the workday. On this site in 1995, I arranged for the planting of 2 southern magnolia trees, FDR's favorite, following my visit to Warm Springs, Georgia, to attend a ceremony commemorating the 50th anniversary of President Franklin Roosevelt's death. For a period of months and years, I watched the trees grow and then wither, succumbing to the city's severe winter weather. We then go to the East Green. Central Park serves as my summer country place. On weekends over the years, I have spent hours on the East Green, seated on the grass, leaning against the trunk of a red oak, where I read and write. From here, I see the 5th Avenue skyline, the Frick Mansion, and a memorial to Richard Morris Hunt, architect of the Lenox Library, which previously occupied the Frick site before becoming a founding constituent part of the New York Public Library. The red oak is a handsome tree, standing 60 feet tall and proud. Its broad canopy has long provided me with beneficial shade. I select the red oak as my tree. On hot days this summer, I will continue to enjoy its shade and listen to the sound of its swaying branches. At night, I will watch fireflies dart around the trunk. In the fall, I will admire its bright orange leaves. Every other year, I will collect the acorns it sheds. In winter, I will visit my tree as it braves the elements. The Portuguese writer José Saramago, in Small Memories, a memoir, describes his father, late in life, going from tree to tree in his garden, embracing their trunks and saying goodbye to them, to their friendly shade, to the fruits he will never eat again. Late in my life, I will do the same.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Sorry. Beautiful. Alrighty. Bartholomew, am I saying your name right, Bartholomew?
Yes, yes, you are.
All right, bless you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be on here. Thanks so much for letting me come in.
Of course.
So I'm going to tell a brief story. Hopefully it's brief. I met Bill at my first job out of college at neighborhood Lenox Hill, at Lenox Hill Neighborhood House. I taught there, and at night I met this man, Bill Dean. He came in with his cool, clean suit on, and is very deceptive. And I would be like, "Oh man, you want to play basketball?" And he'd be like, "Yes, I do want to play." And then we play ball, we shoot around, and we just would just have a good time. We talk so much trash to each other. But Bill was a warrior on the basketball court. Like, looks are deceptive. He had this amazing outside shot, like over the head. It was so deceptive. Like, all the guys would be like, "Come on, you can't." And then he would just hit it. He would hit these shots. He would talk trash. He would hit you. He would all the things that a basketball player would do, Bill did on the court. And I think the thing that was like super inspirational was that he was the oldest on the court, but he was able to go up and down the court, shoot baskets, talk trash, get into arguments, and he made you feel like it doesn't matter how old you are, you can accomplish anything that you want at any age. And he was that major inspiration for me. I was at Lenox Hill for 15 years. So we had like a relationship for 15 years where I would teach it in the morning, and then at night, me and Bill playing basketball around the world, shooting foul shots. And then from there, we just cultivated like a community of other basketball players that would come in, and we would play full court games. And it just was just a special time in my life. I feel like Bill watched me grow up. He met my wife to be now, and then he met my first child, which is incredible. Bill also invited us to this NBA game where LeBron James was playing on the Cleveland Cavaliers, and we went out, a bunch of us that played basketball, and we just had a blast, and it was so much fun. It was the game where the guy ran out on the court. I think a fan ran out on the court and was arrested. It was a pretty famous game, but we were there, and it was so cool because Bill, even though Bill was like old enough to be my father twice, he still was one of the guys. And it's something that I'll greatly miss. I mean, I was playing basketball with my son when it was a lot warmer, and we were shooting around the world. And I mean, I definitely felt Bill's presence. I know Bill wasn't a super religious guy, but I felt his presence when we were playing. And, you know, I still try to carry on that legacy of playing basketball with my son and shooting around the world. And I think about Bill often, and he'll greatly be missed by me and my family. And it's such a sad loss, but man, did he give such a tremendous amount to people. He's just so generous. And the thing is, you know, when we play basketball, he could blend in with anybody. Like there'd be some rough ball play, like rough people on the court, and Bill was able to blend in. But when I was on the court with him, I also felt the need to protect him because he was my friend. So we greatly love Bill and greatly appreciate all the presence, all the things that he did when he was on this earth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bartholomew. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Oh my. All right. Thanks again. Okay, Mr. Mehta. Are you there, Mr. Mehta? Let me just scroll this list here. I do not see his name. Mr. Mehta, calling once, twice. Sorry about that. And I do not even know how to say some of these names. Bordel Tirana. Yes, no? Everyone can hear me though, right? Thumbs up, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so, oh, hey, Christopher. Chris, Carol Malone, is there a Carol Malone there? And maybe I should, let me make sure I can unmute.
Carol Malone is here.
Yay, Carol Malone. Yes, okay, excellent.
Good. Good afternoon. I'm Carol Collins Malone, the chair of the New York Society Library. And I'd like to share with you my tribute to Bill, as well as a few tributes from other board members. First of all, Bill was among the most memorable chairs of the Board of Trustees, and each of us sincerely appreciates his 31 years of service to the board. He served as 12 years as chair from 1992 to 2005. And among his most salient traits were his loyalty, his candor, and authenticity. As chair of the board, particularly as a new chair a few years ago, I appreciated his mentorship, as well as his humor. He was a consummate trustee, intelligent, questioning. In fact, sometimes I regretted that questioning quality. He was a skeptic when I wanted to be enthusiastic, but I appreciated it. He was lively and generous of spirit. A few tributes from other board members. From Lawrence Bergreen, Bill was an absolute gem. From Robert Caro, Bill lived a life, it seems to me, of great simplicity with a fierce devotion to a few causes, all noble ones. Every time we spoke, I felt I was talking to someone from another, better age. I'll miss him, and the library will miss him. From Ella Fauché, Bill was a gentleman, a scholar, a teacher, a humorist, a New York aficionado, and so much more. He was someone who made you happy just by seeing him enter the room. From Susan Robbins, Bill was chair of the board when I joined. He was very welcoming to and appreciative of new trustees. Among his many other activities and good works, he was always a strong and continuing supporter of the Children's Library and Project Cicero. Project Cicero is the library's initiative to both collect and deliver books to the libraries in the public schools. I'm very saddened by his passing and will miss his presence at our meetings, as well as his annual visit to Project Cicero's yearly distribution. And in fact, Bill and I went down on the 2nd Avenue subway when it first opened to the Hotel Pennsylvania opposite Penn Station, where we had our annual book distribution. And I will really miss our trips together. From Ted and Betsy Barlow Rogers, they remember his wonderful smile and never failing geniality. Ted says he will be ever grateful for Bill's bringing him onto the board of the library, and Betsy for Bill's never failing love of Central Park. Trustee Jeanette Watson Sanger, I shall miss him, his dedication, his humor, his essays, and his joie de vivre. He is probably the last person who will address me as young lady. From Betty Kelly Sargent, Bill Dean, an extraordinarily kind, compassionate, and scholarly gentleman who truly understood how difficult life is for most people and who did so much to make it better for them. And finally, from our head librarian, Carolyn Waters, who's with us this afternoon, I feel as if I saw Bill just as often on the streets of the Upper East Side on his way to or from his regular basketball games as I did here at the library. He was always so full of vim, vigor, wit, and intellectual curiosity. We'd fall into step, chatting about the library, the books we had read, and his latest projects. Bill was a true New Yorker, and I, for one, will miss his stories about life in the city and will dearly miss our pleasant random encounters on the streets in the neighborhood. And I'm sure Carolyn is not the only one who will miss those random encounters with Bill on the streets of our neighborhood. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Ms. Malone. Okay, so is Charles Berry here?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you just fine.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be able to participate in this occasion in Bill's memory. Bill was a very dear friend. I succeeded him as chairman of the New York Society Library in 2005. And much as John Kiernan was just saying, I was very much the recipient of his encouragement to take on and succeed him in those responsibilities. As a lifelong New Yorker, I always appreciated Bill's very deep love of New York City and his love of writing and his love of walking. I have a very vivid memory when I used to commute to Midtown on the Fifth Avenue bus on a summer day or spring day, looking out as we passed the Frick and seeing Bill at that very memorial, the Richard Morris Hunt Memorial that Sarah Efron was talking about, and seeing him there reading his book with his brimmed hat before he undertook his long walk down to his office in Soho. When I took over the chairmanship of the library from Bill, I greatly appreciated his guidance and mentorship, as Carol Malone was attesting to. And I made a few remarks in the annual meeting, my first annual meeting, and I thought I'd share just a few sentences from that. After reciting his many accomplishments, many of which have been noted already, I said that perhaps the most important and meaningful for me personally was that Bill set a tone, an example for all of us who have been involved in the library. His indomitable good cheer kept the board's interactions on a positive footing and made board service a pleasure and a privilege for all. He was firm and decisive when the occasion demanded, but he always maintained a clear sense of the library's mission. He was fiercely proud of the fact that the library, founded in 1754, was the oldest cultural institution in continuous operation in New York City. But he was also equally dedicated and proud to the present, and particularly to the Project Cicero that Carol mentioned, which brought literally millions of books to public school classrooms through the leadership and energy of Bill and others. Bill never let us forget the importance of what Emily Dickinson, in a letter to her friend Joseph Lyman, called the dearest ones of time, the strongest friends of the soul, books. I think many of you know that his last book was a collection of passages from his reading, Before Us on the Road, which I have a chance to look at and recall, because it really gives a tremendous insight into Bill's thinking and the writers that were important to him. It was under his watch that the library celebrated its 250th anniversary, and they published a terrific book edited by Jenny Lawrence and Bill's predecessor, Henry Cooper. And Bill wrote a beautifully expressed appreciation in that book of his favorite author, Chekhov, in words that could be equally applied to Bill himself. He understands how difficult life is for most people. He is generous in portraying those who strive to live a better life, even when they may fail. He is modest, he never condemns, he is tender towards those who suffer. I greatly valued Bill's example, and pleased to share these thoughts with all of you today. Thank you.
Where's my little girl? Is she here?
She left.
Oh.
I'm unmuted, by the way.
Stephen, you're muted if you're trying to talk.
So sorry. Alexander, I'm sorry. How do you say your last name?
Erklands.
Oh, yes, Alexander.
It's not easy.
It's not that hard, but thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, thank you for letting me say a few words about my good friend and classmate, Bill. That is a high school classmate. Bill and I met about 70 years ago, not quite 70, when he joined our class as a sophomore. He loved to tell the story about how he, quote, escaped from his boarding school in Pennsylvania, and to his mother's surprise, showed up unexpectedly at her doorstep in their apartment in 96th Street. He only agreed to return to his boarding school after getting a firm promise from his mother that he could enroll the following year in a local school, which turned out to be collegiate. And how fortunate collegiate was to have him as a student. Bill stood out not only because of his height, he was by far the tallest in our class, but also because he was fun to be with. And he was a very enjoyable individual. He and I played on the basketball and tennis teams together. He never let me forget that he was the captain of the basketball team.
He was the captain of the tennis team, and I played a subsidiary role. We also enjoyed each other's company in the History Club, where we discussed historical matters from A to Z. But we also argued incessantly about politics, Bill being a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, and I, back then, a Republican. During the 1952 presidential election, the school held a mock convention. Bill speaking on behalf of Adlai Stevenson, and I supporting Eisenhower. To this day, he claimed to have bested me in the debate. He would never let me forget that. Bill was one of the most respected members of our class, and in our senior year, he was selected as its president. Upon graduation, we all went our separate ways. Bill to Harvard and then on to law school in Columbia, here in New York. He began what turned out to be an exceptional career, using his legal skills and enduring empathy to improve the well-being of his fellow New Yorkers, especially those who were disadvantaged. To list all the organizations with which he worked would be a tall order, but the one which to me exemplified his humanity and innate goodness was the Coalition for the Homeless, where, as Nemet Habashi earlier mentioned, he served as the Wednesday night driver of the food van. How many of us have given so selflessly to the needy? With Bill in New York and me in Connecticut, we saw each other infrequently, but reconnected at our 50th reunion. And so over the past 15 years, we saw each other regularly, usually for dinner, occasionally for lunch. At my 70th birthday, Bill graciously accepted my wife's request to speak about my time at Collegiate. He did so with his unique sense of humor, and again, could not resist noting that he always expected me to end up as a tour guide at the United Nations. Bill came out to visit us in the country for lunch on Sunday, August 9th, just a few weeks ago. He was rather frail and seemed to have lost some weight, but he was in generally good spirits, especially having been cooped up in his 73rd Street apartment for many weeks. He said he missed his weekly basketball game at the Lenox Hill Youth Center, the camaraderie with his mates at the Century Association, and working from time to time at his law office desk. He was pleased, he said, to have completed his third book, Before Us on the Road, Passages from My Reading, a signed copy of which he gave us. He also left us with a copy of his latest column for an Indian periodical, in which he wrote, "This summer, I'm making good use of my time in the city with my personal journeys." Perhaps he wrote this under his favorite oak tree in Central Park. My wife Margaret and I were so happy to share a lovely summer's day with Bill. We had animated conversations, laughed a lot, and reminisced a lot, and had simply a wonderful time together. We put him on the train. I brought him to the train and asked him to please call me because I want to be sure that he got home safely, which he did. Little did we realize we would not see him again. Bill, you left an inspiring legacy. I'm proud to have known you and proud to call you my friend. May you rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. Okay, and now the next person, James Silbert. Let me just ask to unmute. It looks like James Silbert is there.
There.
Yes, hi there.
I just unmuted myself. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Here.
I know many of you who knew Bill remember him for his passion and devotion for social justice and his unwavering commitment to act on those beliefs, not just talk about them. And others may remember him as a modern-day Renaissance man for his love of books, literature, writing, music, opera, art, architecture, lifelong passion for world travel, and good conversation. But despite those memories, many of you probably do not know that this modern patrician-looking Renaissance man also had a lifelong passion for basketball. That sweaty, non-intellectual, and sometimes gritty, fast-moving game. I knew Bill for more than 20 years when we were both on the board of directors of the Correctional Association, the prison monitoring group that many have already spoken about. Bill and I had gone on about 10 or 15 different prison visits together during this time period. And I would like to share with you 2 basketball stories about Bill and basketball. As you know, Bill was very, very tall, about 6'3", and very, very thin, probably no more than 150 pounds. He grew up in New York City, first went to school at St. Bernard's Elementary School, and then to collegiate. He started playing basketball in those days. Many years later, as recently as about 2 or 3 years ago, he shamelessly shared with many of us photographs of himself in his collegiate basketball uniform, circa 1955, wearing those short basketball shorts, an orange sleeveless basketball jersey with their skinny arms sticking out, and those high black-top sneakers. He also showed us a recent photograph taken when the collegiate school was finally moving out of its building on the Upper West Side. And they were playing their last game in the old gym, where Bill appeared and took a shot with the current basketball team. Of course, according to Bill, he made the shot. The first story I'd like to tell you about took place during a prison visit at Attica Prison about 15 years ago. Bill and I and about 7 or 8 other members of our prison visiting committee attended the visit. During these visits, members of the visiting committee inspect all areas of the prison. We talk to inmates and staff and walk through the cell blocks. There are some restrictions on our visits, primarily relating to safety issues, but not upon our ability to talk with inmates. One of the areas that allows our group the most direct contact with inmates is the visit to the gym, since the inmates have the opportunity to move about more freely. On that day, our group went into the massive gym filled with inmates playing basketball, lifting weights, and other exercise equipment. Usually, our group sticks together, first meeting with the correctional officers in charge of the area, and then disperse into small groups to speak with inmates. The gym was very, very noisy, with basketballs bouncing and men talking loudly. As our group was walking up to the head correction officer, Bill walked slowly up to a group of inmates who were shooting baskets. He watched them briefly and then asked one of them, "Can I take a shot?" All of a sudden, the balls stopped bouncing, and one of the inmates threw the ball to Bill. Bill, who was about 25 feet from the basket, picked up the ball and took a two-handed set shot, which went swish through the basket. Suddenly, several correction officers ran up to Bill yelling, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Almost sounding a red alert in the gym. Realizing that perhaps he had done something he shouldn't have done, Bill turned to the correction officers and said, "Did I do something wrong?" With a little twinkle in his eye, he walked back to our group. The head correction officer finally calmed down and we resumed our visit. The second story I'd like to talk about took place a few years after that. For many years, several of us on the board at various times talked to Bill about basketball. Periodically, he would tell us that he still played full court basketball a few times a week. After a board meeting, a few of us were talking to him, and Bill said, "Wouldn't it be fun if a small group of us could play basketball one night after work?" He said, "I play at the neighborhood gym, and we could play there." So 4 of us, Bill, Bob Ganji, the executive director of the Correctional Association, Ricky Jones, another board member, and I agreed to meet and play one night the following week. That evening after work, We met Bill in the lobby of the Lenox Hill Neighborhood House on East 70th Street in Manhattan. This was no 21st century East Side exercise gym like the Equinox, with svelte-built young men and women prancing around in color-coordinated spandex. No, it was different than that. Bill walked up to the locker room on the 3rd floor with us, and when we approached, it brought back smells of years past, of a well-used and well-worn locker room. He showed us the lockers where we would change from our street clothes. Despite the surroundings, Bill, as always, was wearing a blue blazer, a white shirt, a striped tie, and khaki pants. I said to Bill, "Why the jacket and the tie?" He replied, "Mother always said I should dress appropriately. You never know who you'll be meeting." We changed our clothes and walked up to the gym, all of us dressed to play. Bill was wearing his 1950s style short shorts, and I believe black high tops. As we entered the gym, it was clear that everyone knew him. He was like the mayor of the gym. I think Bartholomew can probably vouch for that. It was a big gym, with a big full court game playing in the center, which was in progress. And on the side, there was a small game in progress as well. It didn't look as if there was anybody in that gym over 40 years of age. He asked us if we wanted to play full court. The protocol was that if a new group came in and wanted to play on the main court, they have to play the winner of the prior game. We all agreed that we should probably be more fun if we just played 2-on-2 on one of the small areas. And so we chose up sides. Bill, who was over 70 at that time, 6'3" tall and thin as a rail, who started playing basketball as a kid at a private boys' high school in New York City. Bob Ganji, who was also about 6'3". However, he weighed about 225 pounds. And he started playing basketball in the streets of Brooklyn as a kid and also played on weekends. Ricky Jones, who was about 6'1", about 175 pounds, and he built like a linebacker for the New York Giants, who started playing on the streets of Queens and perfected his skills at Sing Sing prison, where he also earned 3 college degrees, including a master's degree. And me, also about 60 years old, 5'11" in my prime, now probably 5'9" and 150 pounds. And many years ago was only the 6th player of my high school basketball team in a New York City suburb. We had a wonderful time. Bill's shooting ability was amazing, and so was his style. Those of you who grew up in the 50s may remember a 2-handed set shot and long forgotten 2-handed jump shot perfected by Carl Braun of the Knicks. This was Bill. He was a little slow, but he seemed never to miss a shot. Under the boards, this mild-mannered Bill didn't hesitate to use his elbows a little bit as he grabbed a rebound. We kept changing sides back and forth until we were all getting so tired after about an hour. We agreed to play one more game, and in the middle of that last game, I fell or was tripped and ended up on the floor. It turned out that I had torn my Achilles tendon in my leg. But despite the injury, it was great, great fun. And for many, many years, we often talked about that evening with much, much fondness. Although Bill continued to play basketball at home and at basketball courts throughout the world, where he would often go when he went on vacations and trips with local kids during his travels, he still played well into his 80s. I have to admit that that was the last game of my career, and now I have trouble keeping up with my 7-year-old granddaughter. In closing, I often think about one of the stories in Bill's wonderful book, My New York, A Life in the City, where he said, "I have played basketball and attended operas for decades. I marvel at the talents and energy of players and singers. I know the rosters of both the Metropolitan Opera and the New York Knicks. It would be wonderful to have 1 or 2 of them on my team. We would never lose." Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, so we have 2 more people on the list. And then after that, maybe we can try to go back to the people who got cut off. And I understand, just so you know, I booked a lot of time on Zoom. If you need to leave, of course, you know, we would understand. But if you want to hang around, then I will be here and I can certainly keep this going. And for now, Bob Ganji, can you hear me? Robert Ganji.
I can. Thank you,
Okay.
Stephen.
Excellent. We can hear you. All right, you go right ahead. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've reached a point in these proceedings where I could think of Bill making this kind of remark. Everything has been said, but not everybody has said it. So just a couple of things I'd like to speak about. Bill was chair of the board. Bill was actually chair of the search committee that hired me to be director of the Correctional Association and when I took the job in 1982. He was the first chair of the board when I took the job, and he was the chair of the board for the last couple of years when I worked at the CA and when I left. And his leadership skills were very, very impressive. I don't think that surprises anybody who's participating in this Zoom session. He was thoughtful, good-natured, collaborative. He had the respect of the Correctional Association staff and board. And he, while being good-natured and good-humored, he was also decisive. And he was, the two periods when he was director, when I began my job, and the Correctional Association had fallen on very lean times, and the last couple of years before I left were critical times in the history of that organization. And the history is a long history, as probably most of all of you know. The organization had been founded in 1844. And Bill's sure hand and wisdom and graciousness were critical to the good work that we were able to do and the continuation of that organization. Bill and I were also friends, in addition to him being, in effect, my boss when he was chair of the board at the CA. And one of the things I liked about it is, despite our friendship, is that despite our very different personal backgrounds, there was a lot of interest that we shared, and many of which people here have talked about. Basketball, certainly, literature, movies, social justice, prison reform, cigars, hats. But opera was not one of the things that we shared a love for. Bill, as everyone knows, was, to call him an opera buff doesn't capture his devotion to the art form, his love for it, and his knowledge about it. I, for better or worse, was never a big fan of opera, never resonated with me, or hardly resonated with me. So, but my wife Barbara loves the opera. And so I would occasionally for Christmas or birthday want to get her tickets to the opera. And Bill became my advisor because again, I knew so little about opera. I didn't feel I could on my own pick tickets to a show that Barbara would really appreciate. So I would call him and we would have a conversation that concluded with him recommending the shows that I should seek to buy tickets for. So on one of these calls, I asked him for his help. So he took out the schedule for the Met, and he saw that there was an upcoming production of La Boheme. So he says to me, "So Bob, there's an upcoming production of La Boheme." And I had this vague memory that Barbara and I had seen it. So I said, "Well, you know, I think we saw that show. Is that the opera where the woman dies at the end?" So of course, Bill chuckles, and in his very non-condescending way, he said, "Bob, that is not exactly a distinguishing feature for operas." And so now Bill has passed on. as did the lead woman in that show and in many, many other operas. And we will all miss him greatly. And I just want to say, I guess, maybe, I don't know if it's on behalf of all of us, but certainly on behalf of my wife, Barbara, and myself, to rest in peace, big guy. We will miss you and we love you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. Okay, so we have one more scheduled speaker, and Jim Morales and Bardell, I may be saying your name wrong. If you're still around, you want to hang out, we'll try to get back to you next if everything's working okay. But
Stephen, there was one other person who asked if he's still on, Michael Westgate.
Yes.
Also mentioned he might want to speak, but we'll wait for Barbara to speak first.
Okay. Are you there, Barbara?
Yeah, hi.
Excellent. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for giving me time to speak. Given the numbers of speakers, I'm going to try and be brief. Unlike many of you who shared beautiful, beautiful memories of Bill, and I enjoyed listening to every one of them, I know Bill for only 16 years, which seems a very small time compared to those of you who had the joy and pleasure of being lifelong friends. I first met Bill when I joined the board of the Correctional Association, then the Century Association. And then we discovered we were neighbors like Joan and Carol, and we would meet from time to time at Maison Kaiser for breakfast. I have two stories, which are subway stories, and then another to share. Two more for share. So Bill and I would often take the subway back uptown after our Correctional Association meetings. And when I was new to the board, Bill, in his incredible generosity of spirit, was trying to make me feel at home and comfortable. So he asked me what I was doing. He knew we both write. And I told him that I was working on my great aunt's memoirs. And I explained that she and my grandmother had been orphaned in the pogroms in Russia and had been forced to leave Russia rather quickly because of their family's radical activity. They were wanted by the Tsar. So Bill says, wonderful, I have family in Russia also. And he proceeds to tell me the story of his grandfather, who I believe was an executive at Gillette and who had supplied the Tsar's army with all of the razors. And he went on, and it was a fascinating story. And we were close to getting off at our stop. And I said, Bill, you know, it's a wonderful story, but I think our ancestors were on different teams. And with that grin and that impish look, he said, yes, Barbara, but it's only taken us 2 generations for you and me to be on the same team. So I thought that was a kind of wonderful inclusiveness about Bill. The second story is also interesting. We got on the subway and it was very, very crowded. And we're, you know, hanging onto the straps, and this young man, I would guess in his late 20s and early 30s, looks up at Bill and says, sir, would you like my seat? Bill whips out the picture of the basketball game and he says, young man, I am 80 years old, or 81 at the time, and I still play full court basketball. And I hope that you will be as fit and as able as I am to play. And this guy is kind of sinking back into his seat. And I'm thinking, I would love to have taken the seat, but I'm shamed into doing it. And the man, the young man who offered the seat said, thank you, sir. And I think Bill felt very comfortable about how that ended. But it was my first experience of seeing the beautiful picture whipped out of Bill being this incredible athlete and wonderfully apt on the repartee. Third story was about 3 years ago. My little granddaughter and I were leaving Central Park, and we were walking down 73rd Street, and I see Bill coming towards his apartment. And she was kind of shy at the time. And I said, Maddie, Mima knows this man, so we're going to stop and talk. Now, you know, Bill was considerably tall. My little granddaughter was rather short, and I was a little apprehensive about how this interchange would go. Bill noticed that she had a sheaf of paper in her hands, and he said, what are you working on there? What are you working? And she said, my Mima and I are writing a book in Central Park. So he grinned. He said, "Oh, you're going to become a writer like your grandma?" And she said, "Yes," very seriously. And I thought that would be it. I couldn't have been more wrong. Bill practically crouched to be Madison's height, which was quite a feat. And he wanted to know all about the book, The Mystery of the Ballet Slippers. And she went on and on and on. And he was fascinated, so genuinely interested, that when we left, she said to me, "Who was that tall man? He was just so nice." And for the next couple of days, she said, "Do you think we'll meet him again? Do you think we'll meet him again?" And unhappily, we never did. But The Mystery of the Ballet Slippers is still to be completed, just to mention. I know that Joan and Carol said they live in our neighborhood, so I'm not sure if you know the block that Bill always loved. Bill lived between 3rd and Lexington, and I'm on 3rd, between 3rd and 2nd Avenue. So we used to see each other quite a lot in the neighborhood, but never with as much pleasure as when our street was lit for the holidays with the Christmas lights. It is a street that literally people come by to take pictures of. And often I would see Bill there, and this man who was so cultured and so loves the arts and so enjoys beauty would always say to me, "This is one of my finest moments. This is one of my happiest moments, looking at the lights and seeing these trees and all of the people coming." And I think it's a bit of timing that's very beautiful that our lights went on for the year last night. And today we're having our memories of Bill. And I thought to myself, if only he were here to see them. So thank you all for letting me know.
Stephen, can I say a word quickly?
Of course, yes.
Barbara, thank you. Your little, your stories just brought up so many things. Everyone's stories. I'm Uncle Bill's niece, Stephen's sister.
I wish I were too.
I want to thank all of you for being here. We've heard so much over the years about all the organizations, all the names that have been mentioned, and you summarized so many things that happened last Christmas when we were visiting New York City. My family, I have 3 boys, one of them plays basketball, the other 2 don't, but we participated in parts of what everyone mentioned today. He took us to the Lenox Hill Community Center, where he was charmingly reacquainted with some young people who were still in college, but were there for their Christmas break and had been city interns and were visiting New York, played basketball with them, played basketball with my son, who is just finished high school, took us to that street with the Christmas lights because he wanted us to see his favorite street with the Christmas lights, told us which tree to look for when we went to the Frick so that we could look at his favorite tree across the street. I mean, it's just like these stories permeate every day. This is his being. And the Kaufmans kindly wrote a note about his greatest gift being his care of his family, which is so true. Our last time together, other than my dad's memorial service in March, was when we all celebrated my Uncle Bill, my mom, and my dad's birthdays last January, which we did every year. We celebrated all the January birthdays together. And Uncle Bill was always at my parents' apartment. Whenever I came to visit New York, he would come and see us. So I just want to thank you all for being such wonderful, warm friends of his, and really sharing with each other the wonderful qualities we got to see all the time. And I do know there's one more person who had requested to speak. I don't know if he's still here, but thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, I'm just going to jump in and say, just from a personal perspective, and Elizabeth might agree, for me, Uncle Bill was kind of like a third parent. We spent a lot of time together. We have a small family, or a third sibling. He was somewhere in between, because as you all mentioned, he had a rather impish nature. So he sort of had that unusual role in our family. And he also, I will say, one of the last conversations we had, and something we shared in common was how important his friends were. So his, friendship was very important. So that's why I know you all meant so much to him. So yes, Michael Westgate, if you are still there, are you around?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, loud and clear.
One role that Bill had that has not been mentioned is that of headmaster. Back in 1962, my father was asked to help found a school in Fajardo, just east of San Juan. Bill Westgate was head of St. Bernard School. Bill Dean was a couple of years ahead of me there. And my father asked Bill if he would be the headmaster for Fajardo Academy. And Bill told him, I've never been a headmaster. I don't know anything about it. And he'd done a little teaching at St. Bernard's, I think on a substitute basis. And my father said, well, I think you'd be a fine one. And Bill said, well, there's one other problem. I'm supposed to join the Marine Corps in a couple of months. And my father said, well, surely we can take care of that. And wrote a letter to the commandant of the Marine Corps. And evidently the answer must have been yes, because for the first year of Fajardo Academy, Bill was the headmaster. I just wanted to share that with all of you, and that Fajardo Academy is still going strong, K through 12. Bill must have set a strong foundation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and there is, I don't know if you noticed, there's a photo in the slideshow of Uncle Bill visiting Fajardo Academy. I think it maybe was their 25th anniversary or something. And so that was a wonderful memory for him.
If anyone's interested, the archives at St. Bernard's now have my father's papers, and there's a couple of inches in the files there on Fajardo Academy, including Bill's role.
Yes, we're definitely going to follow up on that. So, and I do apologize. I don't know. I think let's just try to see if this works. If Jim Marlis, are you still there?
Stephen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I had a little catastrophe with my Wi-Fi and became disconnected in the middle of what I was attempting to say. But I will, if I may now,
yes,
conclude. I will conclude with at this eulogistic celebration with a little bit of an elegy. I have to tell you, I was very, very fond of Bill, and in many ways, he was a very touching fellow. He lived passionately for other people. He also, rather like a worldly monk, if you will, he lived alone. He lived alone in a space that he remained the same, not very large, in a very nice neighborhood for at least the last 60 years. And I think he nourished himself with all of his connections to other people. You've heard for the last hour or two many stories of how he, in many ways, got into the skin and under the things that people hide behind, and he discovered where they were coming from, what they wanted, and how best, in a way, in his own way, to delight them. But Bill, on many levels, chose, I think, as I said, the life of a worldly monk, and he diligently applied himself to the work of his mind, the work of his hands, the work of his time, and certainly had many adventures. But when you come down to the point that we have all reached now, the greatest sadness is that he had really only himself in this time of self-isolation. And I felt very deeply about that. And I know my sister, my only sister, who was also an extremely close friend of Bill's and took care of him and oftentimes took him out, and the two of them went to dinner together and spent time together. And unfortunately, when we learned of Bill's end, it turned out my sister called me and she was weeping. And she said, you know, Bill called me just a few days ago and told me how terribly lonely he was. And if I had only heard those words, I would have tried to do something. But, you know, we were all cooped up. And this, in a strange way, is the wrong way and a sad way. But in a sense, you know, Bill was always the gentleman, always thinking of others, always courteous, always giving. And in a way, I feel like, in a sense, we failed him at the end. Right now, I occasionally have this moment when I think maybe he'll send me a blog about his latest adventure and say, it's okay, Jim, everything's fine. I hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And I had forgotten, Mrs. Fox, are you, let me just see. Are you around? Yes, the Foxes?
We're here. We're here.
So I think you had some technical difficulties earlier, correct?
Yeah, I switched from an iPad to an iPhone and it's much happier.
Okay, well, yeah, now I hear you loud and clear, so.
So I just wanted to say Jim's words have really hit home with John and me. Jim is responsible for John and me actually getting married. Bill was, along with Jim and many others, one of John's ushers. So we've known Bill for a long time, but one story that people may not know, someone mentioned, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who, didn't think Bill was a particularly religious man, but during their undergraduate career, and John will back me up, Bill suddenly wanted to be baptized as an Episcopalian, maybe. He needed godparents. And John served as his godfather in the baptism ceremony. I'm not quite certain that John fulfilled all of his godfatherly duties, but except that when our son Tom was born, we invited Bill to be Tom's godfather. And Tom was unable to be listening in today, unfortunately. But I just thought people would find that an interesting aspect of Bill's life that they might not have heard about. The other thing that we thank Bill for, he visited us frequently here in Boston. And he would stay on our third floor where we have guest room. And he urged us to improve on the banister going up the very steep third floor stairs. So we did. So we have a sort of, thanks to Bill, a better banister going to the third floor, and also a grab bar in the bathroom, which he thought would be a good idea. The pity is that he never returned after we installed all these things. I don't think he ever got a chance to be on our third floor again. But we just, every time I go up and grab onto this aspect of the banister, I think of Bill. And we hope other guests find it helpful. And then finally, there's a photograph that unfortunately didn't get into your slideshow of Jim, Bill, John, anybody else? In formal dress, playing croquet. Whose house was it? Somebody tried. Anyway, some hostess was quite shocked when the boys turned up in their formal clothing to play croquet.
It was on Mount Monadnock.
Correct.
It was on
Correct.
Mount Monadnock, and we were at the Putnam's house, Michael Putnam's family.
Okay.
I'm intruding on you to remind you.
No, thank you.
And John was in a top hat, 6'8" plus another 2 feet. It was a monumental, let's say, scene on a monumental mountain.
Yep. Top hats, tailcoats, and everything. It was.
Exactly.
It's a marvelous photograph, and I'm sorry, it's in Maine, and we haven't been able to go to Maine, but that's where the photograph is. So those are just a few vignettes from us.
Thank you. Thank you. And when you are able to get a hold of that photo, if you find a way to send it to me, I will make sure it gets into the slideshow. John, I think you did a very good job as godfather, even if Uncle Bill didn't go to church every Sunday. We know he was a good man. So you should feel very proud. So thank you both. I think that's all the people who were scheduled to speak, unless Mr. Mehta is there. Let me just sort of scroll. You know, at this point, if anyone feels like you're comfortable with just jumping in and saying whatever you, Ardil is here.
Hello.
You go right ahead. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Hey.
Bardil Tirana.
Yes, we would love to hear from you.
Okay, speak on it.
I'm Bill's. I shared 2 years at the Columbia Law School. We lived together, and he was marvelous. My brother and I were. My brother had gone, and Bill and I had been at camp at our senior years, and then Bill and I went to the Columbia Law School, and after my brother left, Bill and I lived in an apartment, and we had a marvelous 2 years, and we communicated nonstop. I was in Washington afterwards, and came back to New York in the early 21st century, and Bill and I had seen each other, and my wife, but I saw him. He was part of our life, and with our coming back to New York, we could see him, and this is a shock that he's not here anymore. Particularly now that we are in New York.
I think that's enough.
Anyhow, I miss him terribly already.
Stephen.
Thank you, Bardil. We appreciate that.
Stephen, may I interrupt you?
Yes, please.
I have the photograph that John and Judy wanted you to see. I don't know if it's lit well enough, but it's right here.
Wonderful.
Look.
You see it?
Yes.
Put you on speaker view.
Does it show it?
No.
Oh, that's
marvelous.
There's Bill in front with a croquet mallet about to hit a long one. which would go down the mountain, of course.
All right, don't move the photo. I just did a screenshot of it. If you take a picture with your phone, you can send it to me, but I can use a screenshot. I'm very, very highly skilled at Photoshop.
Will do.
It's my only skill.
While we're on photos, may I hold this photo up and take the chances of your seeing it properly? Bill and myself on our bicycles in front of the Hermitage in Moscow.
Oh, it's fabulous.
Oh.
Rather isn't bad, is it?
That is great. I remember that sounded like an amazing, amazing experience, that trip.
I thought we should prove that we were there.
Yes, well, I would believe you, Namat. I would never doubt your word. I heard about that in real time. So if anyone else has anything to say, feel free to jump right in. Do I?
I'll send it because I imagine they're putting this in a permanent form.
I
I think he said.
think we're,
I would just like to add something. I'm Terry Roach. We were friends
Okay.
at St. Bernard's. I saw him begin and initiate the
Oh,
two-handed set shot.
When he was in grammar school.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, if I could add a word. My name is John Feerick. I'm a professor at Fordham Law School for the past 40 years. And I just, in the last few months of Bill's life, we exchanged a number of communications arising out of blog or articles he had written. And as somebody said, he lived passionately for others, and I feel incumbent upon myself acknowledging that that was so in my case in terms of all the encouragement and help and humor and observations he brought to work I did chairing ethics commissions in New York State, and also doing other kinds of public services. Bill was always there with encouragement, with suggestions, and with caring. And
I didn't hear.
I think I was just saying that that Bill was always there. I'm just one individual with one life. And he became a very important part of my life over the past 40 years. And a week before he died, we both agreed that we were going to get together on that street he lived on. He wanted to show me where he lived. And he also honored me a few days before he died with sending me, I guess, what he called his unpublished memoir, which were observations that he made at different points in his life. There might be a moment that he wanted to capture forever, and he put that down. And almost on the day that I heard he died, there was his memoir with an inscription to me. So I'll always be grateful to him for his friendship. And I would hope that family members who would be aware of that particular book that he considered his unpublished memoir to give consideration to sharing it more widely.
Bye.
And I just thank you all for your reflections this afternoon. I didn't realize that I would spend these 2 hours in one of the most important Zoom experiences I've had since the pandemic began. Thank you all.
Thank you. What do you think? Anybody else? And, as a reminder, as I said, there is the Facebook page. If you have anything, you have my email. If there's anything you want to send to me, I could put it on there. And John, maybe we can touch base. His journals are still in his apartment. Anyhow, there's more to be done, and I'm happy to continue this conversation. Anyone else have anything they'd like to say at this time?
Just thank you all for joining us. It was, I think we as a family did a lot of mourning by ourselves, and it was all the outreach to Stephen and Michael that prompted Stephen to organize this so that all of the circles of people in Uncle Bill's lives could actually share this together. And it's incredibly meaningful to hear all your words. So thanks again for being part of his life. And for those of you who felt Jim Marlis and who felt he was alone, he was, but what's I hear is that he was seeing people up until the very end. He was connecting with people. So he wasn't isolated for 4 months or 6 months or whatever it was. It was just the loss of the normalcy of the automatic engagement. But many of you in this audience apparently had moments, and that was very comforting to me to know that he'd been at people's homes a week before, 2 weeks before, on the phone, having dinner, because it's been an incredibly isolating time. And knowing that there was so much connecting throughout that was incredibly comforting for me to know. And I think you should know that as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This was a great idea and a great execution.
Well, thank you all. And I'm sorry it didn't happen sooner, but better late than never. I wish we could be able to do it in person, and maybe someday we could do it again in person. And Clay Hiles, I'm not putting you on the spot, but there was some talk of a visit to the tree. So if anyone's interested in that, when you feel comfortable, Clay Hiles and Joan Davidson are the people to speak to. And it's a beautiful tree. If anyone wants to know where it is, I have a very detailed map if you want to visit Uncle Bill's tree. And it meant a lot to him, but more importantly, you all meant so much to him. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, be well, and we'll have a lovely evening.
God bless all.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Salute.
Thank you very much.
All right, you take care.
Thank you all the best.
Attention is very.
Thanks and goodbye.